Hey, everybody, welcome in Gorilla Sports Off Ice. It's Friday. Going to be a fun show for you guys. We're getting into trade targets, potential trade scenarios. I'm Jesse Montano, going to be joined by Meghan Angley here in just a moment. As always, got to remind you guys about our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Go to trustedamerican.com/sports right now. They want to help you lower your monthly interest rate, get a better payment every month. And hey, if you go to trustedamerican.com/sports, they might even be able to help you defer those mortgage payments for a couple of months. Head on over, trustedamerican.com/sports. See how much money they can help you start saving today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hey, everybody, welcome in. How's it going? I'm Jesse Montano. She, that way, is Meghan Angley. We're not in the studio today, and it's all my fault. Well, technically, it's my HOA's fault, but hey, doesn't matter. Meghan, how are you doing on this Friday? Sorry for having to pivot this morning.
It's okay. It only ruined my day, but I'm not just kidding. I'm just excited to dig into our show topic for today. So my mood can't be shaken. I'm in a great mood.
Good. All right. Well, I love to hear it. We are also going to, I'm springing this on you a little bit. We're going to take our next step in our checking in on where the Avs roster is at today as well, but it's going to be with the easiest part of the roster, what's happening in net. So we'll round out the show with that. But Meghan, yeah, this is the, and I know there are some people who probably don't love the speculative types of conversations, but that's what this time of year is about. The Avs have holes on the roster they still need to fill. And the free agent market has more or less dried up. So we are going to turn our attention to what could the Avs potentially be doing when it comes to the trade market. We are going to run through yours and myself, our trade boards that we put together, that we put out this morning. But I guess let me start here. Where are you at if the Avs are deciding to go this route? You know, we've had a lot of talk this summer and even in the lead up starting the trade deadline that, hey, this is a team that doesn't have a lot of trade pieces. It is going to be hard for them to make a deal. They've given themselves some more flexibility. Are you comfortable with the Avs going the trade route, given the way that things sit right now, free agency, their roster, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, because I think for the very bottom of the lineup, they can address some of that with internal options come training camp time, as well as some PTO invites. But that third line remains a concern for me going into next year, that I wanted to go back to the start of this show where you talked about how some people might not be crazy about speculative shows like this. And I want to drive home the point that the Avs bottom six is kind of a mess right now. They're going to start the year without Logan O'Connor, and they don't have a third line, essentially. So This notion that the Avs are ready to head into October with a fully ready lineup is silly to me, because there is a lot of work to be done in the bottom six. And that's why I think we're looking to the trade route. Now, some of these are a little bit over the top. I'm not necessarily suggesting all of our trade targets are feasible, but this idea that they would consider bolstering the bottom six through a trade is not hard for me to believe, and it's kind of necessary. And the other thing too is they do have assets that they could trade. You just might not want to trade them. And there are roster players that you can look to that would only then create more holes, but there is concern outside of this season, what comes next for the Colorado Avalanche to continue to keep this window alive. And so everything that we're doing today might seem a little silly on the surface, but it's not only very necessary in the immediate because the Avs are not ready to start the year, but also in the years beyond. You know, there are some decisions they have to make about players and their futures here in Colorado that extend beyond the status of the prospect pool and the lack of draft capital that the Avs have.
Yeah, and just building off what you're talking about there was, I'll just go on. Yeah. There was a comment earlier that was like, oh my gosh, just accept it. The roster is set for night one. They'll make adjustments. I was like, whoa, if they go into night one with this roster, that is way below expectation for me. Like, I actually kind of see it in line with what you were saying, Megan, and the opposite of that comment from earlier. I don't see there being any world where they go into opening night with the roster as it's currently constructed. I think you're bang on. Like, I don't think that this is an out there notion at all. I think this is something that's going to be a reality for the Avalanche. And but like what you're saying about the trade route, I think the Avs have a lot of options. And I do love your call out of the prospect pipeline is maybe not as barren as others would like for you to believe, that, national, rankings would have you believe. I'm with you. I think there's some stuff in that pipeline that's of interest.
Well, just to clarify, I'm not really leaning on the prospect pipeline to complete any of the trades today.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
My trades would be born from more extreme measures that move out a roster player. And that's just
extreme measures, man. It seemed like I'll take care of how these trades get done. All right. Don't worry about it.
Some magic and spell work will be performed.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. But though I do have a lot of faith in the prospect pipeline, the trades that I have pitched for today actually target a lot of top six players. So I want to address that at some point too, that I'm pointing to the bottom six as the area of the lineup that needs the most work. And I actually look at a trade like the Dakota Joshua trade from just yesterday as the level of trade that I see, Dakota Joshua for a fourth. I see that kind of a trade helping to round out the bottom of the Avs lineup. And so we've gone a little extreme in our hypotheticals for today because we're eyeing bigger fish. But just to be clear, I do think the point of emphasis is the bottom six. And I think there are easier ways to achieve rounding that out through trades still that don't require trading Ross Colton, which I plan to do today.
And that was honestly something that as I was going through mine these last couple of days, that was something that was going through my head too, Megan. Was like, okay, well, if you're doing this, it's to bolster. And I think we talked about it on the show last week. My focus is middle six. Can you land a player that can float somewhere in that middle six that can be a really nice piece on your third line and give you some minutes on your second line if needed, for injury or whatever reason. But I think we got a fun mix. You know what my favorite part of this is, Megan? For the first time, we've done a lot of lists in the last year where we each give our take. This is the first time we've had very, very different lists. Like, we usually have a lot of overlap. Not really the case on this one. Is there anything else you want to say before I put our trade bait boards up there?
No, just that I do have some honorable mentions that would address bottom six as we go into the show. They just weren't as exciting for the
two of my honorable mentions are on your list, so we're in good shape.
Perfect.
What?
Perfect.
Oh, okay. All right, here we go. So here is the lists for Megan. Mason McTavish. This is not necessarily any particular order. Mason McTavish, Jared McCann, Boone Jenner, Jordan Eberle, Kent Johnson. For me, Mason McTavish, which is our one overlap. Ricard Raquel, Evan Rodriguez, Yegor Chinnikov, who has a trade request in with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then my kind of off the board one here was Alex Tuck from the Buffalo Sabres. Megan, just looking across the bow at yours, I really like the Jared McCann pull, and I really like the Jordan Eberle pull.
I have seen McCann as a name that has been floated as a possible name that Seattle would move on from. And so I thought, why stop there? Why not make Jordan Eberle available as well? I have justification for this too, but some of it was just the summer that Seattle has felt a bit weird to me, going back to that Ryan Lindgren contract and then paying Mason Marchment when they weren't willing to pay Tanev. And so I just have found some of the decisions around Seattle's roster construction a bit puzzling. And in targeting someone like Jordan Eberle, for example, that is their captain with a full no move clause. I don't necessarily view this as super realistic, but what I find interesting is almost all of these on my trade board operate on the assumption that Colorado has insight into Marty Necas's next contract. And that insight includes knowing if the gap between both parties is too big for them to reconcile for that next contract. You know, Mason McTavish on this list, another player that's up for a big contract and could still be extended with Anaheim. I think that his next deal projects somewhere around up to $9 million. And that's actually around the number I'm comfortable with Marty Necas, but I'm hearing $10 million as the number that's sort of projected around Necas. And if the Avs do have something of an internal cap, as we were led to believe with Rantanen, and that is a number too rich for their blood moving forward, then Marty Necas has just become their most valuable trade asset going into next year. And they don't necessarily need to move Marty Necas in the summer because in a contract year, he's highly motivated for his stock to just continue to rise, that he could hold more value closer to the deadline. So there's not this urgency for them to move on from Marty Necas, but it has opened up as this possibility if there is that knowing that that is just not a number they're going to come to agree on. So do they get a top 6 option in a player like Jared McCann or Jordan Eberle, who is more of a short-term solution, and then address rounding out the top 6 after this year with a number and a player they'll be more comfortable with? Because Jordan Eberle, for example, just has one more year at 475. So it's certainly a number they can stomach. And at 35 years old, I think that he has the culture add, the veteran presence that they'd like, but he's still a high volume shooter that would make a difference in a top 6. You're kind of dreaming on this a little bit, but you look at what Seattle might have to offer a player like Necas and seeing what they've offered players like Ryan Lindgren. And maybe there is a world where Necas would extend in Seattle, you know, another tax-free state that just makes this a mutually symbiotic agreement for both parties. Jared McCann, a little higher on my list because at 29 years old, I think there's a little bit more upside, and you've got 2 more years at $5 million to round out your top 6. So that would be a really intriguing ad with a 40-goal season as recently as the 2022-23 season. He can obviously handle top 6 minutes and hang on a top power play unit, and still plays with great pace, great shot. The shooting percentage was just a bit down this last season, but you look at the prior seasons and his body of work is incredibly compelling. That I understand I'm shipping out Marty Necas to make some of this happen, but it's to give the Avs a little more flexibility in what they do to round out their top 6 past this season.
Well, let's get into it. And I have to point out, can you tell that you and I follow a pattern? 30% of our list comes from the Columbus Blue Jackets. We understand what's happening here. Well, let's run through this, Megan, and I want to circle back on both the Seattle players that you were just talking about, because I think you raised some great arguments for why they would make sense, why deals like that I don't think are that far-fetched. But let's start with the one player that we both had in common. We don't have to spend a ton of time here because we have talked about this player at length, but Jeff Merrick did just report this week that Mason McTavish is more available for trade right now than he has ever been. It sounds like things just, the contract negotiations just have not gone the way that either side has wanted. In Anaheim, they're still kind of in transition. I know he didn't love his utilization in Anaheim before, and now new head coach and things like that. But this is a player, Megan, that I think both you and I are obviously very high on. And this is a guy that I think that could come in, and I think we talked last week on the show, almost be the heir apparent to the 2C, but come in right now and fill in that third line role. Give a guy like Ross Colton some more skill to play with. And then by the time that Brock Nelson contract is done, you know, Mason McTavish theoretically is coming right into his prime, 25, 26 years old. And that's kind of the next natural progression. I think this is one that it would probably be the most costly move of everything we've got on our board here. But this would be something that would reset the age of the core a little bit, and it would give you a really exciting young player to watch, you know, grow into your system.
Yeah, McTavish is at the top of my list, and I think yours as well, even though we didn't technically number these. But there are also several hurdles to clear, not just for the Colorado Avalanche, but any team interested in McTavish. And that is, one, you're trading a premium for just his signing rights. And then you have to come correctly in what you offer him to ensure that somebody else doesn't swoop in and offer sheet this player.
Offer sheet him.
And I think there's a huge threat of that because this offseason has exposed the market for centers, just how thin it is and how desperate teams are, to include Anaheim and what they paid Mikael Granlund this offseason. So I think seeing Tavares sign for such a team-friendly deal in Toronto and then the Avs getting that Nelson extension done, I want to keep calling back to why that is such a good piece of business, because you've got a 22-year-old player who I think absolutely has 2C upside, but isn't quite there yet, with teams clamoring to put him in as a set and forget 2C tomorrow because they are desperate to fill that position. Now, I have a lot of faith in what Mason McTavish is as a player, but his development path has been a bit stunted, so his utilization has been lesser leading up to this point, that I wouldn't feel comfortable as an NHL team plugging him in at 2C out the gate. My interest in him for Colorado is more the 3C role with room to go into a 2C down the line at the end of that Brock Nelson contract, to be honest with you. You know, what's interesting about McTavish, going back to what I've loved about him in his World Juniors showcase, speed isn't necessarily his game, which concerns me a little bit, but he overcomes it so much with his work ethic, his motor, and his nose for the net, honestly.
Seems like such a Jared Bednar guy.
He's such a Jared Bednar guy. The energy that he plays with, you know, this real knack for jumping on loose pucks. I think power can be his game, and I don't think the speed is something that will necessarily hold him back, but this actually crops up with other players on my list. That's kind of why I'm addressing it, that it is interesting to me that this player, who I think hasn't been fully utilized to the best of his ability, would make so much sense stylistically in Colorado. But I have to recognize that there are so many other teams clamoring for him that it just might not work out. You know, all those hurdles that I mentioned that Colorado would have to clear to get him, I think that the number and the value you could be getting, because you are investing in him young and kind of early, even though that upside is projected to be quite high, could help to keep him as a decently affordable middle six player that would be a contract that ages extremely well if the Avs are willing to take a little bit of a risk. But this is still, you know, we're back in Marty Netsch's territory, because I don't think Anaheim is going to be looking to just part with center depth, especially at the top of the lineup like this, after moving on from Trevor Zegras. And I find it interesting, too, that they invested in Kreider and Granlund this offseason, that I think they're trying to make a case for bolstering that top six. And what's not clear to me yet is if that's because it's built around McTavish or it's insurance in case they don't have him anymore. Either way, I think this might not be necessarily just Marty Netsch's territory. They might be interested in a center being a part of this return just to load up on that center depth, because I'm not sure how they feel about Cutter Gauthier as a center at this level. And so that's where Ross Colton starts to enter the picture too, as possibly a piece in this return. And suddenly this is getting very expensive, very pricey for the Avs. So it is a little bit of a dream, but if there is any fire around the smoke that McTavish isn't super happy in Anaheim, that might give any NHL team a little bit more leverage to
an opening
happen, get this across the finish line.
Now, two things here. One, where did it go? Do not tempt Meghan Angley with a good time here.
Guys, he was in my top 5, and I took him out for Boone Jenner. And
Troy Terry is the name in question for our auditory listeners.
I would be willing to do stupid things to get Troy Terry in Colorado. And I say stupid, I mean, like, you know, I'm not really sure I believe that any of what I just mentioned gets Mason McTavish across the finish line. But I could see like a Ross Colt and Troy Terry swap being something that is feasible. He's got 5 years left at $7 million. Obviously, I think at the time, maybe that felt a little rich, but with the current cap era and it just continuing to go up, it makes so much sense.
Right. By the time you get to next season, who cares?
No kidding. I'm a little confused by his usage even this last year. I think that he could have a similar role, but obviously elevated in postseason opportunity here in Colorado. The money makes sense. He's a 10-team no move clause, but something tells me there could be interest in Colorado. And his stylistic fit is stupid. He could
It's
stick
perfect.
handle in a phone booth, skates like the wind. He would fit in so well in Colorado. At 27 years old, there's still so much gas left in that tank, and just a highly productive player, so versatile. And so that's actually why one of my other like sneaky throw-ins is a guy that played on a line with Troy Terry a lot this last season in Ryan Strome. And this would be an interesting return to help round out the bottom six. So that's why he doesn't make my trade board. It's not necessarily a need. He can PK, hasn't done it as much in recent seasons.
Ryan Strome?
Yes, and hasn't dipped below 41 points in 6 seasons. And I actually think that level of consistency is what the third line has lacked for Colorado these last couple of seasons. He's not the quickest skater, but he is a workhorse, has a high motor, and so he'll skate, has a heavy shot, and was pretty productive this last season on a line with Troy Terry. 2 more years at $5 million, so the money's, maybe not feeling super good, but this would be if there was a world where Ross Colton was shipped out for some reason, it would be to just help replenish a center on that third line.
So let me... Talking Troy Terry / Mason McTavish. And see, folks, this is why we do an hour-long show. We're one name into our list, and we've already taken 2 side quests onto 2 different names. This is why 60 minutes. So Mason McTavish / Troy Terry. Let me float a name at you that gets it all done. Sam Girard. Now, I don't know if you want to dig into your bag of lefties on the back end, which is already only 2 deep.
Right.
I don't know if you want to subtract a defenseman who's at an outstanding number with the way that we're seeing defensemen get paid. And, we talked about the defense a couple days ago, and I actually like where this D-core is at, but I don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there because you look at what Anaheim has on the back end. Sam Girard to be very different than what they have. And I mean, he probably plays a pretty big role immediately. Quarterbacking power plays, things like that. I could see them being interested in a player like that. If you're talking one of these, Mason McTavish, Troy Terry, and it helps the Avs get the money done. What do you think?
I obviously don't love just shipping Girard out, but I love this in terms of looking at what Anaheim's needs might be. I think that left side in particular on the back end is very young. And so I think that Girard would add a little bit of maturity. And you're right, represent something a little bit different. And I think it would give a better balance. You've got a veteran in Radko Gudas, who is the Butcher, I think is his nickname, for the heavy physical game that he plays. Jacob Trouba obviously plays the game he plays, that, I've been critical of, but those are 2 veteran players that can help lead that D-core. Girard is going to be an experienced player who represents something different. And with some of the young talent like Zellweger, who's coming up through Anaheim at the moment, I think that could be a really good role model to sort of take on and have as a mentor. I thought the Drew Helleson extension was really interesting too, just because I look at where Sam Malinsky is at in his career and his utilization to Colorado. And it feels like not only did the Avs get a Josh Manson from that trade, but they replenished what, could have been an option on that right side coming up as a young player in Malinsky through college free agency. And so I just thought that was a good piece of business. Helleson and Malinsky, very different players. But I think it's taken Helleson a while to earn the trust at the pro level to even really be getting full-time regular NHL minutes. So I just found that an interesting secondary piece of business from Colorado and how they find unconventional ways to round out parts of their lineup that they don't always get credit for.
Yeah. So, that would... Let's just, for the sake of the argument, Mason McTavish, right? I think you'd have to do a sign and trade to avoid even the quick potential of an offer sheet. and again, I'm going to make up a number here. I don't know if this is where McTavish ends up coming in. Let's just say it's 7.5. Again, might be more than that, but I'm just for the sake of the argument. You move out Sam Girard in that swap, that leaves you enough wiggle room. Shoot, I mean, even if the contract was 8, that leaves you enough wiggle room to go out and add another lefty defenseman, shore up a bottom pairing if you'd like. And again, it'd definitely be a different look on the back end, but I do think that that's a piece that if you're talking Mason McTavish, Troy Terry, that may be more the room that you're in when you're talking about what the Avs would have to give up. All hypothetical.
Yeah. I think you'll have to give up a little bit more. Not, nothing crazy, but like I think you might have to give up more. But I don't know. I'm not trying to ship out Ross Colton at every turn. That's the Columbus side of things. Wait till we get to Columbus, you guys. Yeah. I'm reuniting him with Miles Wood. I've got this whole plan. But I do think that a lot of these moves not only involve moving on from Netchus, but possibly Ross Colton as well. Hopefully not both together, but I think those are two players that have suddenly become at risk of being moved.
Still on the board, yeah. All right, well, let's move on here. Let's keep moving down our board. We'll go to the next name down on each one. Ricard Raquel for me, Jared McCann for you. Let's start with Raquel because I think this is kind of the easier conversation. It's a fire sale in Pittsburgh. This is a team that is doing everything they can to enter the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. And to Megan's point earlier, this is another player that, again, I think is more top 6, middle 6 than anything else. He had his career year last year for the Pittsburgh Penguins, going 30-30. Ricard Raquel, again, it would definitely cost you a bit, but I think the hope here would be that you can exploit a little bit of the Pittsburgh Penguins looking to add prospects and draft capital and things like that as they're looking to end up near the bottom of the standings.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with Raquel's fit in Colorado. I think, the cost, especially coming on the heels of a 35-goal season, is going to be a little bit extra, a little bit premium. And so I have no issue with it. I think it is going to come at a greater expense than what we talked about when we floated this idea on an earlier show. I don't think that draft capital or even a prospect, I think this is still going to have to be some kind of a roster player of value that perhaps makes Pittsburgh a bit younger. So I don't know who I'll volunteer for this one, but maybe it's Ross Colton again. I'm just kidding. I can't do that to him. But
no, I mean, this to me is a Gulyayev, maybe a Nabokov type. And I mean, I guess they just traded for Archer Shelovs, but this is, I'm with you. If you're not talking roster player, you are definitely talking the higher end of Colorado's prospect pool, someone that the Penguins could see being able to plug into their lineup sooner rather than later. Like I said, I would have been remiss to not put a Penguin on here because they are probably the only team right now that is already in seller mode. But I agree with everything you just said. This is definitely coming off a career year, been a great piece next to Sidney Crosby. This one will definitely cost you a bit.
I think his production has been a little bit up and down over the last 3 seasons. It's still great. It's just maybe coming off of last year, it's solidly top 6 production. I think before that, though, it's been more middle 6. And so that would be maybe where there's leverage. But because he still has 3 years at $5 million, if you're getting a top 6, high-end ceiling player, I do not think Gulyayev would get it across the finish line. Even I think
not by himself. No.
You gotta go bigger. And I don't know. I'm not trying to talk myself out of it. I just think you have to be prepared to give a little more.
Yeah. Well, and the other issue that the Avs are in right now when we're talking about these types of deals of having to give up is the Avs are trying to add. And so that's where, to your point, like there's definitely some jigsaw puzzling that we're having to do here to make this all make sense.
And that's where it makes sense to swap out kind of a 1-for-1. It feels maybe lateral or like a net neutral in the immediate. But if it's like a Netchis replacement and it's a player who has a little bit of term past this year or has interest in signing a Colorado past this year, it immediately has positive value. And it also spells the end of Netchis' chapter in Colorado, which we haven't even really gotten to see a full season of. So going back to the earlier point in the podcast of, I think his value will be highest as a trade piece in season. So this isn't necessarily something the Avs have to do now, unless they really have an idea that they're never going to come close to the same value on Netchis, and there's something too good for them to refuse in their face right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like the I think Ross Colton, I think Sam Girard, like you mentioned earlier, could kind of be finding themselves in that realm. But I agree with you. It's got to be something for the Avs that whether it's in the immediate or, like you said, having that term, you've got to find the net positive in there. And I think there's plenty of moves out there to be made. The Avs may be already tapping into some of that draft capital that they just have started to get back, like over the next couple drafts. Definitely for just about any of these, maybe one or two of them. As we get down to the quote unquote bottom of our list, there's some kind of finagling you can do, but definitely creativity needed to get a lot of these across the board. Let's go back to Seattle. Let's touch on both Jared McCann, and then we'll do Jordan Eberle as well, because I do think that kind of goes hand in hand. And I loved your call outs earlier of this has been an interesting summer for the Seattle Kraken. Pretty much an entirely new regime behind the bench. Some interesting contracts they've given out. We've seen Jared McCann's name out there. Again, these are definitely two middle six, top six type of guys. You'd have to do some moving around. But like I think I said off the top, Jared McCann, Jordan Eberle were both on my radar. They're definitely on my honorable mentions list.
Yeah. Jared McCann, I kind of addressed some of what makes him a stylistic fit as it is, just being able to handle top six matchups and play on a top unit. A left shot winger who could play C, not that that's the expectation, but I don't know, in a pinch, if they did need to find somebody on that third line to center it for parts of the season, this is a player that I think could play that role at times. Again, this is if Ross Colton is somehow not in this room with us. But his value with 2 more years at $5 million, I think, is very agreeable. I think that there's still really great pace, great shot, and I think his production dipped a little with the shooting percentage this last year, but has been really consistent otherwise. And going back to that Seattle season in the title defense year, like, I know there's weird blood between McCann to Makar and Eberle to Cogliano. I don't think this is an issue. I was going to make that joke. Like, now you did pick a couple controversial Seattle Kraken for I'm sure a large portion of the Avs fan base. But I'm with you. And maybe this is a silly line to draw. Dave Hackstall, now behind the bench as an assistant for the Avs. If this is a guy who can maybe provide some insight for the Avs front office into, either one of these guys, like, hey, this would be such a great stylistic fit. They would help here. I don't know. Maybe that does make a little bit more sense now than it did even a couple weeks ago. Just having that other little bit of familiarity, but the Eberle to Cogliano one, I think, would be more awkward than anything. But I think that they had history as teammates previously that made.
Were they in Edmonton together?
They were, and so I think that they were able to squash it. I'm sure it took Cogliano some time, but I think he also knew Eberle's character and knew that this was more of an anomaly. Same way like Makar to McCann, right? Like, that isn't Makar's character either.
I will never forget that, though, because I was in the building. We saw the puck go out immediately. And I mean, it was a full 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and Kale just crushed him. And we all said immediately, like, he had no clue where the puck was. Anybody that has watched Cale Makar play hockey for 5 minutes knows that's not his style. Gabe Vilardi, 6 years, $7.5 million per with the Jets. Avoids arbitration. Just a quick aside.
Sorry.
No,
One
go
other
ahead.
name I'd throw out of Seattle that maybe isn't such, what's the word I'm looking for? Like high end, is Jaden Schwartz at 33 years old. He has 1 more year at $5.5 million. That's Charlie Coyle money. And I think, in hindsight, Charlie Coyle money for a third line role started to feel a little bit expensive, but I also think the value of shipping out Charlie Coyle was moving on from the Miles Wood contract. Hindsight. So I think for 1 more year, they could stomach that kind of money for a middle six role. He's another player where like the speed isn't exactly where I'd like it to be, but he still has a motor and high-end speed bursts that could keep up with the way that Colorado likes to play, and he's still great at finding his guys through traffic. So there are aspects that I like about Jaden Schwartz's game that could be of interest to me in Colorado.
Yeah, it's a great call out, even because I've even seen some chatter in the chat today about like, man, they should have just kept Charlie Coyle. I think the Avs really like Charlie Coyle, but that was the cost of doing business. And they needed to get out from under the Miles Wood contract. That's what it cost. And now they're trying to, and it goes back to what we were talking about off the top. Another reason why, Megan, this team is definitely not done making moves until they're not going to stand pat until October, because they made some moves that left some holes that they have to get filled. And we know Chris McFarland's not going to just stand by on that. All right, let's keep moving down here. I'm going to do Columbus last.
Cool.
Because I think there's a lot of reason to believe that that's where the Avs end up here. Evan Rodriguez. This is a name I've seen floated around as Florida continues to try to get their cap situation back under control. And I mean, geez, the players they re-signed certainly did them some favors. But Florida's still sitting about $3.7 million over the cap right now. They've got to shed some space. Evan Rodriguez spent 1 year in Colorado. Was it perfect? No. But at $3 million, Megan, he'd be coming back with a couple years of Stanley Cup champion experience. He's familiar with the system. I think he liked it in Colorado. This would be a guy that, again, my ultimate guess is that they find a way to keep him in Florida. But for a team looking to shed some cap, I did wonder if the Avs could maybe try to take advantage of that a bit and bring old buddy Erod back.
I think it's interesting because I can't help but feel like, no, they already tried this. You know what I mean?
I know.
No, they're not going to revisit it. It's, you're getting caught up in Mercury retrograde right now and reminiscing about exes. And it's a classic mishap. But I actually really liked Evan Rodriguez in Colorado too. So I'm giving you a bit of a hard time.
No.
But I even liking him and thinking people were too hard on him, sort of rightfully. Some of it, I think, forgot that there was a time around December where the scoring was down for the team as a whole, and Evan Rodriguez was one of the only players managing to put the puck in the back of the net at that time, and it was really valuable to the Avs. But at the end of the season and then going into playoffs, his game kind of dried up a bit, and I think maybe I just have some trauma around players drying up in the playoffs, because this happened to the Avs this last year in the Dallas series. When I look at what the problem was past the power play, being unable to convert, it was having too many players not going at once. That'd be the last thing I want for Evan Rodriguez to do a second time in Colorado. So I'm happy with the success he found in Florida, and I actually feel that change of scenery was a necessary jumpstart for Evan Rodriguez.
Yeah, I agree.
To kind of better dial in his game. I think the role, too, was another challenge for Rodriguez here.
This is where I was going to go. Yep.
They weren't sure if they wanted him to be the 2C option. And so I think it was a little all over the place, a lack of clarity in that versus going to Florida. I think there was so much more clarity in what he needed to be that helped him. So there would be more clarity now than there was before.
when Evan Rodriguez was with the Avs in their title defense season, the Avs tried 3 different players at 2C. JT Compher, Evan Rodriguez, Alex Newhook. You'd be bringing him back here because I'm totally with you on we've already tried this before. He'd be coming back with a much more clearly defined role. You are the third line center. We're not asking you to be a top 6 guy. We're not asking you to produce like that. We're asking you to help drive this third line, give a guy like Ross Colton a little bit more of a skilled player to play with, have that high motor, and bring some of those, because I completely agree with you about him going to Florida. Like, I think Evan Rodriguez came to Colorado. I think his game actually took a step in Colorado, and just like, his mentality, the way he played 200 feet, and then went to Florida. And I think he's just flourished. But that's my argument in favor of Evan Rodriguez is he'd be coming back with a much more clearly defined, lesser role than what he was being asked to do at times when he was with Colorado in 2023.
2 more years at $3 million for Evan Rodriguez is really agreeable in terms
Very
of
palatable
money spent on the middle 6. So depending on what Florida would have interest in as part of the return, I would not say no to this trade. I think that third line remains probably, like, given this trade board, it's the least addressed part, but the most important thing going into the next year. So shout out to you, Jesse, for staying on task and actually trying to fill this out.
For staying 20% on task. You did it on 1 out of 5. Good job, Jesse. Woo! All right. So that's Evan Rodriguez. And then our last non-Columbus Blue Jacket, and this one's off the board. I have not heard anywhere that Buffalo is interested in doing this, but this is, again, a bottom 6 option. Alex Tuch from Buffalo. And what's the rationale here? Buffalo's a mess all of the time. So maybe you just want you got another player who wants out of the mess. And this could be a nice leadership add to the bottom part of your lineup that plays a little mean. The foot speed is not maybe quite where you'd want it all the time. But Alex Tuch was my kind of off the board. Haven't heard anywhere, but I thought this would be a nice veteran add with some snarl to the bottom 6.
I was just pulling up his NHL Edge stats, and his foot speed is not half bad. So
really? All right.
Don't sweat that too much. It's not as bad as some other players I've come across in trying to pick my trade targets. But I think going back to the very first qualifier you gave, that you haven't necessarily heard this as a player Buffalo is interested in moving, that's the sentiment I've heard as well. And so I have extreme interest in this player, just not sure that he's actually available to be moved. But I love this mindset because I've sort of tapped into, well, they've done other silly things. Like, let's peek at the carcass of Buffalo. And that's sort of how I was looking at Seattle and a little bit, not so much Columbus, but a little bit Seattle, a little bit Anaheim. Like, well, they've done other silly things. Like, what other silly things can we talk them into?
Yeah.
And so,
what else can we bully them into?
Like, yeah, let's bully them into this. No, I like Tuch's fit. I do think, he's a forechecking player with more high-end upside, can hang with top-end talent. Yeah. Not so different from what I want Ross Colton to be in Colorado. It's just been tough with this last season. Starting off hot with opportunity in the top 6 for Ross Colton, and then experiencing injury, coming back from injury, and not really being supported with the talent I think he needs, which is why I think that tees up the Columbus part of the conversation.
Sure does. So we're going to round this out. 3 different players made our combined 9-player list, with the one holdover of Mason McTavish being on both. So Megan, you've got Boone Jenner and Kent Johnson. I've got Igor Chinnikov. Let's start with Boone Jenner. This has been a guy I actually really like. This one, Megan. The Avs have been tied to this player for multiple trade deadlines, multiple summers. He was a pending free agent a few years ago before he re-signed with Columbus. The Avs were around him then. Boone Jenner, I would say this is a third line player. I'd say you stuck to the assignment here.
I think he could be a third line player in Colorado, but has been utilized in a more elevated role in Columbus. And what's interesting, and I don't know if it helps the Avs at all, is he experienced a shoulder injury at the end of training camp last year and missed a lot of time. And what maybe hurts their case is in his return, there was a huge shift in Columbus that kind of energized them into that postseason bid that they had hoped for. And I think that there was so much else to rally around for Columbus this year, but I think the return of their captain in Boone Jenner was a huge part of that. And so if you dig into the numbers of this last year, you're probably very concerned about Boone Jenner, but he's had some 20 plus goal seasons the past 3 seasons, excluding the last one. And so I'm just looking for a little more consistency in the middle 6 contributions, especially on that third line, because I think the second and top line for Colorado are going to give you the production you hope for going into next year. It's that third line that I think has left us wanting, where we're eyeing the marginal improvement of Logan O'Connor's year-end points totals year by year. Like, well, okay, but he is improving year by year, guys. And he is, but I think when you're looking at what you want for that third line moving forward, you just want a little bit more than the 26, 27 point trajectory that Logan O'Connor had been on. And that is not to call him out so harshly. It is why that fourth line is what it is for Colorado. That third line needs to be something different. And so I think a few of the players I've pointed out now have more consistency in their production that I think Boone Jenner would handle himself against the matchups in a third line role for Colorado extremely well. And he's still in the 70th percentile for speed bursts over 20 miles per hour, which is an NHL edge stat. And I definitely don't just know that. But I think his pace of play and the offensive upside is absolutely still there. It makes a lot of sense. It's just when I look at the year Columbus had, they seem so interested in not changing things as much as possible and trying to run it back, because there was a lot of magic in what they had last year that I'm not sure Columbus will part ways with any of these players easily. Boone Jenner, maybe if they want to get younger. And so this is where you can replace a center option in Boone Jenner with a younger option in Ross Colton if you believe in the upside that's there for him. This reunites Ross Colton, who has a 12-team no-trade clause. Unclear if Columbus is one of those teams, but
probably not anymore.
There's a Miles Wood in Columbus now, and that could make this all possible. This could be some big brain mastermind plan to get Ross Colton to agree to go to Columbus. And
what's the cap hit for Boone Jenner?
Let's
right
see.
here.
I don't know why I didn't include it.
3.75. So theoretically, you could actually add this guy without having to subtract. Theoretically.
Now you've got a Ross Colton hole to replace. Like, I'm over here worried about the third line. But you have, I think, a little bit more flexibility and certainty, because I get the sense that Ross Colton would like a change of scenery. Not as pointed as he's unhappy in Colorado, but rather I think the taste of the top 6 opportunity he got at the start of last year showed him that ceiling, that even coming to Colorado, I think there was expectation that he could assume a 2C role, near the end of this contract. And that was what he'd be building up to. Casey Middlestat entered the picture. Things got a little complicated. They moved him to the wall. It seems like they liked him there more. He was scoring. I think he liked that. And so I just don't know then what Ross Colton's role in Colorado is. And if having that taste for top 6 opportunity and opportunity on the top unit, I don't know that Colorado can really offer him that.
Right.
But Columbus could.
Yeah. Well, and let's keep it going then with the Columbus train here. And I got to be fully transparent. Igor Chinnikov was a last minute addition to my board, and I actually dropped Jared McCann. But Chinnikov has put in a trade request with the Columbus Blue Jackets, citing a misunderstanding with Dean Evison, just saying that really didn't gel with the way that they want to play, the way they want to utilize him. Now, there's a big caveat here to Chinnikov. dealt with some back injuries last year that kept him sidelined for a large portion of the season. Only played 30 games, 7 goals, 15 points. Young player, 24 years old, good skater. I mean, first round pick from 2020. So this is a young player with a lot of upside. But there are definitely some pockmarks here in terms of injury concerns. When he came back from the injury last year, Columbus said he wasn't really up to the standard that they were expecting. But Meghan, I just thought this was he plays on the right side, an interesting player to kind of come onto the market. And I know Columbus is going to want a nice return. They've already publicly said that they're not just going to give a player away for nothing because he's requested a trade. But look, I've been around this long enough to know that if I hear Columbus Blue Jackets player trade request, I know that the Avs are at least going to say, what is it? What is that? What's he doing? Who? What do they want? Huh? Because they just can't help themselves.
He's interesting because, around the same time of us getting together to make this list, this name does come out as a player who's requested a trade. So he lands on my radar as a result too. And what deters me from him is probably not that compelling, but it's a gut feeling. It's a gut feeling that it's just not a good fit in Colorado. But trying to qualify that with a little bit more sense. I think the worry is if he is not happy with the utilization in Columbus, it only gets more competitive in Colorado. And maybe that is exactly what this player would need, right? Like he's still playing a lesser role, but what he's competing for in postseason play is enough to get him excited about the opportunity. But I just worry that the opportunity Colorado has to offer, right? Because he is probably not beating out any of the top 5 guys on a top power play unit, and he's still probably on a third line in Colorado. At 24, he's still, I think, a young player too that would have to earn a lot of trust with Bednar, and the defensive side of his game will have to be very strong to even begin to earn that opportunity. Not so different from the path that like an Alex Newhook had to take through Colorado. That I'm just not sure then it makes the most sense, but it's not as if it doesn't make any sense. It's not as if I wouldn't have any interest in this player who's offensively gifted, has terrific puck skill. There's a little risk with some of the time missed and just how early you are buying into this player. But
and back issues. That's what you just got out of with Miles Wood.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I added this player to my list. He's a Columbus Blue Jacket who requested a trade. So Chris McFarland's going to be around. I don't fully disagree with a lot of what you just said. You're buying on the upside here for sure. But I also think it's a great call out that is it his role? Was it the style of hockey? What was it that he didn't like about that fit with Dean Evison? And I think you're totally right to ask of would that even be quelled here? Like would he like the role that he's got here better playing under Jared Bednar? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit of gut feeling, but my gut feeling also says that the Avs are not done doing business with Columbus. So I don't hate looking at this roster and trying to see where there might be a fit. I think that the laying the groundwork with Miles Wood to bring Ross Colton to Columbus for some kind of an intriguing return is a bit conspiratorial, but I'm here for it. But I think you're right to look at other players in Columbus. I don't think it's that off the wall.
Yeah. And, I when I went to Columbus's roster, I said, okay, who wouldn't surprise me? You know what I mean? Like, who would it that the Avs pluck off this that I wouldn't be like, what? I didn't see that coming. And I think, honestly, every name, including the last name that we've yet to go over here, Kent Johnson, I think any of him, Chinnikov, or Boone Jenner would all be guys that I think would, if we saw those come through, my only reaction would be, yeah, yep, that makes sense.
My reaction, if they
now
were
hold, I gotta stop everything about this show in its tracks. This is a beautiful graphic as made by our very own Chloe Thiel, and I am getting the business for having not credited her for making such an outstanding graphic. So if you're hearing the bings come through my laptop, that is Chloe just feeding it to me for having not given proper credit, which she deserves.
You
Now.
keep it on the screen a little while longer. It is a beautiful graphic, and we gave her picks late last night, so she threw this together in a record amount of time.
Turned it around.
It's not only beautiful, it came together quickly.
So there you go, Chloe. We've stopped the show to make sure that you get the credit you so very much deserve. Megan, Kent Johnson.
Okay, so if they acquired Kent Johnson, I wouldn't just be saying, oh, okay. I'd be doing backflips and cartwheels because I live on a different reality than I did yesterday. That is not something that I imagine Columbus would really have interest in parting ways with. A former 5th overall pick with insane high IQ, playmaking vision. He had a big bounce back after injury last season, and it's that vision and that accuracy that I think makes him an exciting player. And I think there's even a low-key level of physicality to his game that would make him a high-end Jared Bednar player at 22 years old. I don't know that this is a player Columbus would have any interest in moving on. I think this is a player they could actually build around going into the future.
Right.
But if for some reason this was like Marty Netch's trade bait, they might have a little bit more runway to make Kent Johnson a part of their future if they're clear on Marty Netch's not being a part of the future here in Colorado. But this is fully me just dreaming on what a great stylistic fit Kent Johnson would be in Colorado's top 6. And it gets younger. You kind of shouted that out at the top of the show, some of the other options, because I have picked some older options as we've gone down the list outside of McTavish. So Kent Johnson's just another way to add a little bit of youth and potentially extend a window. So the expense to acquire a player like this who still has 2 more years at $1.8 million and would be eyeing down a crazy extension after that, it's probably so rich for Colorado's taste. But I have a lot of interest in the stylistic fit, so I won't close the door so readily. I'll hear out a few options, but this is one where you're not getting this done with Nabokov, Guliev. No. You're shipping out roster players, probably plural.
Columbus would have to feel like they're coming out better on the other end of this. I mean, this is a 5th overall pick from a few years ago. And to your point, I definitely wouldn't be saying, oh, okay, if they added Kent Johnson. I was more just making the point of there is not a single Columbus Blue Jacket that would ever surprise me for the Avs to acquire. But you're right. I mean, this is, in terms of age and resetting that core a little bit, this is on the same level as Mason McTavish and what we talked about earlier. Of this is a young player that could come into your lineup right now in a certain role, with the idea that this player grows into a larger role, becomes more impactful. The longer that he's here, the longer he stays with the organization. I'm with you. I think this is probably a Marty Netch's type of deal. But I think this would be something that would be exciting for the Avs. To your point, I know that you said that this is a little bit of a dreamy one, but that would be a really nice swing if the Avs were able to pull that off. Really nice swing. Megan, anything else on trades?
No, I think that's good.
And we unfortunately have plenty of summer left, so I'm sure we'll revisit this conversation several times between now and the start of training camp. But just to throw up this graphic one more time, again, courtesy of Chloe Thiel, Mason McTavish tops both of our lists. Then for Megan, Jared McCann, Boone Jenner, Jordan Eberle, Kent Johnson. For me, after Mason McTavish, I got Ricard Raquel, Evan Rodriguez, Yegor Chinnikov, and Alex Tuck. Some ones that we're on here dreaming on a bit. Some that would maybe take some finagling for the Avs to get done. But hey, as we step back and look at where the landscape sits right now, here are 9 names to keep an eye on that the Avs could potentially be interested in. Now, Megan, let's round out today's show. And I intentionally did not leave us very much time to talk about it because I don't think there's much to talk about. For the first summer And you actually, I don't even know if you can count 2021 because they acquired Darcy Kemper that summer. I really don't remember the last summer where we were going into a season saying, okay, well, the one thing we don't have to talk about is goaltending because they've got that solved. I was just talking with Nicole Hensley, Olympic gold medalist goaltender, 2-time PWHL champion. And she goes, I love the Avs tandem right now. She actually compared it to herself and Maddie Rooney in Minnesota of like just having this tandem that you could go with either one and everyone feels confident. Megan, I guess maybe Grubauer, Francouz in like 2019.
But there were so many caveats, right? And some of that was out of their control with injuries cropping up at inopportune times. But that caveat is still there that thankfully we're not having that conversation about the Woods.
Mm-hmm.
The Wedgwoods and the Blackwoods.
Yeah, it's Mackenzie Blackwood, Scott Wedgwood. You and I had the pleasure of sitting down with Scott for about 30 minutes last season, and he talked about the relationship between these two, that maybe the first time they played together, and this was something that we heard when the Avs added Mackenzie Blackwood, that maybe he and Scott Wedgwood didn't have the best relationship when they played together in New Jersey. We talked to Scott about that, and he said, I'm an older player. We both understand where we're at in our career. I understand my role. He understands his role. They have a really great relationship that I think works really symbiotically. And I think I hate to give into it, Megan. There were people that speculated that Alexander Georgiev just wasn't really part of the group. That everyone liked him. He was fine, but that he wasn't like one of the boys. These two goaltenders, this team loves playing for. They love playing for both of these guys. You can see the compete level that they have when when they're playing in front of Scott Wedgwood, and you can see the belief they have in a guy like Mackenzie Blackwood when he's playing. Yeah, I don't remember the last time we were in a summer saying, cool, we don't really need to park much time for that.
I think too, in talking about how thin the market for centers has been, seeing some of the places of desperation that other teams are at to resolve goaltending, looking at Pittsburgh and taking a swing at Shelovs and the pickle that Edmonton is in, because I think they were hoping they could take a swing at Shelovs.
Mm-hmm.
I
texted you one night. I said, what's Vancouver doing? We're not about to see Edmonton jump in on this Shelovs sweepstakes. So
when
that
you
was
said
really weird.
What's Vancouver doing? I wasn't sure what you meant. Like, is this Thatcher Demko that you...
Well, no, I was just, and maybe because we talked about Shelovs last week, and maybe I'm overhyping where Archer Shelovs actually is, but I saw what he was doing with the injury uncertainty around Thatcher Demko. And then who else did Vancouver add in net? Because they went out and acquired a goaltender and then gave Demko the big extension. And that was what I meant when I texted you, like, oh, it was Lankinen.
Who beat out Shelovs for the
last year. Okay, all right. Then maybe I'm just going crazy. But I would have thought that they would have been more interested in getting Archer Shelovs a look, and clearly they weren't. And they moved on from him. But after the Calder Cup playoffs that he had, I was really surprised to see them not at least be interested to see what he turns into. But you kind of got into that last week that maybe the course had just been run for Shelovs in Vancouver.
Well, and I didn't understand why that was either, because I felt that after the demotion and losing out in net to Lankinen, he went down to the AHL and did everything asked of him and launched an impressive near record-breaking postseason run. So I don't know what more Shelovs could have done, because the concern around him was consistency at the NHL level. And he wasn't able to show what he needed to in really limited opportunity. Because even, like coming in relief for the Western Conference final the year before, really high and low. And I don't really blame a goalie for that, change from one game to the next. But I thought he'd get more of a chance at the start of the next year than he did. But he goes to the AHL level, has an incredible season and
Unreal.
demonstrates consistency at the American League level in securing, the Calder Cup. So I just don't really know what they needed to see from him, or if this was throwing their full vote of confidence behind Demko, because there have been whispers of Vancouver's commitment to Demko because of the injury. Maybe this was just their way of committing to their guy.
Yeah.
Either way, in looking at the desperate place that
Sorry,
other
I
teams
got
are
us
at
off track.
goaltending, no, it's okay. It is such an interesting place for Colorado to have not only such a great option as a starter, because I think Mackenzie Blackwood answered the question of what does he look like in the playoffs very well. Even putting up a shutout against a hot Dallas Stars team that, especially in that first round, could not be contained. The magic of the night hadn't worn off just yet for Dallas, and they didn't turn into a pumpkin until the Western Conference Final. But they still couldn't get a puck past Mackenzie Blackwood in Game 4, I think it was. And so I just think his compete, his intensity, answered all questions that I had about what Mackenzie Blackwood can be in net for the Avs in the playoffs through the regular season. So excited to see a full regular season of play, and then seeing what Wedgwood could do, stepping in as needed and still being as ready as you could ask a goaltender to be, whether that was in relief, as we saw early into Wedgwood's time here, or more scheduled starts. He was great. He was great when called upon, and it's hard for a goaltender to stay ready like that. So I think, with Scott Wedgwood, I'm even so excited on this fit that this will be the last year of his contract. And I'm curious to see what the Avs do next if they continue to like this fit, because I think that it holds a lot of value. And if Wedgwood's happy too, this could be an interesting tandem for a little bit more time past this season until we're really sure on Nabokov.
Well, and they, both Wedgwood and Blackwood, not only did they come in and were calming presences in the on the ice and good play, but also what they brought to the locker room, I think can't be sold short in the way that they just fit right in their personalities. I see someone talking in the chat. Val Nichushkin and Mackenzie Blackwood go out of their way to talk to each other and hang out and laugh and joke in the locker room. Megan, I have not seen anyone who wasn't Russian do that with Val in the past. And there's just something about Mackenzie Blackwood that he vibes with all these guys. Going back to Scott Wedgwood, I put the emphasis on Scott Wedgwood. Scott, this is a guy that, again, you hope you don't have to get into the, injury conversation, but this is a guy that can give you a handful of starts in a row, can play can moonlight as a 1B when you need him to. I just think that on the ice, off the ice, the way they work together, I think the Avs have found a really nice mix in their tandem right now. Really, Megan, it does give me some throwback visions to the Kemper and Francouz tandem that just, really supported each other well. If and when you needed, Pavel Francouz could step in and give you a stretch of games like he did in the Western Conference Final, while knowing I'm the backup. When Darcy Kemper is ready, it's his net, and my job is to be here to support, make sure the team is in a position to win games when needed. And I do think that, whatever your goalie situation is, I do think you need that cohesive relationship between your starter and your backup, so that if you do get to that point where you're having to make a pull, you're having to put in, another guy for a start or for an extended couple of games, it can be supportive and collaborative. And I'm not saying that Alexander Georgiev and Justus Annunen didn't have that, but those were just two guys who were kind of to themselves in that locker room. And they just kind of went about their business and they focused and they prepared. Again, not saying either of those guys are bad dudes or not good teammates or whatever. There is just a different chemistry and a different energy between Wedge and Blackwood.
Yeah, they certainly bring a calming presence on the ice, and it's clear that the team has a lot of trust in either goaltender in net. And so it's great to see them step up even in play if it is Wedgwood in net, especially if he's coming in as relief. I think that trust is important. And then in the locker room, I'd say they have the opposite of a calming presence. I think they're kind of agents of chaos. And what I think is really wholesome about this is this tandem working the way that it does exposed a need that I don't know that the organization realized they had. And I think a lot of goaltenders get by, being really agreeable people in the locker room and getting the job done on the ice, and that's kind of where it ends. But to your point, being teammates and integrating themselves and being as vocal and as present as they are has given a voice to the goaltenders in the locker room that's really respected and embraced, and I think that's opened up the opportunity to the friendships that we're seeing. And I think seeing the results on ice is related to why this is important. It's not just important for you to have a goaltender who gets the job done on the ice and is a pretty nice and agreeable guy, but rather if you have a goaltender that can get along with the rest of the team and is connected to them, that can just translate to better results. And I like the Kemper-Francouz comparison. What I like about Mackenzie Blackwood too is I think we kind of knew what Kemper was, especially unfortunately, it was marred by injury, but by the end of that Stanley Cup run, it was just kind of holding on. Like, we just need Kemper to hold on. We know what he is. He had an amazing regular season. This injury has kind of hampered some of his performance in these playoffs, and we just need him to be that Kemper. I don't think we know fully what Mackenzie Blackwood is capable of in Colorado. I think we've only scratched the surface, and that's what excites me about what's next for Blackwood in Colorado.
No, I'm with you. I think this is a tandem that the organization is excited about, and I'm with you. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see them come through with a 1 year, maybe even a 2 year Scott Wedgwood extension while you still are, kind of shepherding Nabokov's transition over to North America. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him do something like that. And I'll add my kind of final thought here on the goaltenders. Then if you got anything else, you're right. Calming probably isn't the right word.
They're calming on the ice. You're totally right.
Well, but I guess and now granted, we weren't in the locker room with Darcy Kemper because of the COVID restrictions, so I can't really speak to this. But in my experience, even Pavel Francouz, who's one of my all-time favorite Avs to talk with, even him, Semyon Varlamov, Philip Grubauer, Pavel Francouz, absolutely Alexander Georgiev, and Jussi Sandin, they were goalies, right? Like, on game day, you didn't go near them, you didn't talk to them, don't look at them. They come in, they kind of get in their zone. They kind of go about their thing. And I know, fans don't care about what I'm about to say, and I don't even care about that we can, but to me, it's just more about what it represents. Either one of Mackenzie Blackwood or Scott Wedgwood will talk to media on game days when they're starting. And that, to me, there's almost just maybe calming, like there's a casualness to them that I think just is kind of like disarming, where like, because I always did. I felt like on game days, like I'd even kind of like take a wide like turn around, if Annunen was starting, I'd go kind of wide around his stall, or I'd make sure I didn't get anywhere close to Georgie's, because that was just, they wanted to be locked in. These guys are just kind of like, Mackenzie Blackwood will sit in that locker room for 30 minutes talking with people. He's stopping people as they're walking by him. And there's just like a casualness to it that I think has just like, it was kind of like a pressure relief valve for that locker room when these guys showed up, of like, okay, you don't have to tiptoe around this goalie. He's not going to punch you in the face in the locker room.
But he might bully you. Mackenzie Blackwood, when there's a lot of media presence and you're walking in, he will compare it to hordes of zombies from The Walking Dead.
Scott Wedgwood will boo us loudly because they have to turn the music off when we come in, and so we'll get booed. But
it's, where the pressure has been taken off the team, it's been placed on us.
That's right. And to be clear, it's all in fun spirits. And again, like that's part of like, they even treat us, a little bit different. Like, we're kind of, they're fine giving it back to us and things like that. And it just, they brought some fun and some levity to that room. No doubt about it.
Totally.
Megan, any other thoughts? Goalies, trades, Troy Terry?
That's all, really. Troy Terry, end of sentence. Period.
Of sentence. End of show, even. Troy Terry, end of show. That's going to do it. We will be back not on Monday, on Tuesday. We got a busy day in the studio on Monday, so we've been slid to Tuesday. We will be back at it with then. And then, of course, any breaking news between now and then, you know right where to find us. When the Avs trade for Mason McTavish, Jared McCann, et cetera, we'll be running those emergencies.
Johnson.
Right. When they do the twofer for Troy Terry and Mason McTavish, we'll do an emergency. And then when they come in behind that the next day and acquire Kent Johnson, we'll be right back for it. Perfect. Awesome. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you next week. Have a good one.